So I'm holding a Gibson Les Paul Custom from 1974. Guitars like these have been used to record music and change culture, human culture, for the last 50, 60, 70 years. But the thing is, human culture is not static, it's constantly evolving. And with that evolution comes a very, very different world for guitars like these, indeed for musical instruments in general. You may deny it, but you have to accept it. And that's what we're going to get into. So hi everyone, welcome back to the Ministry of Guitar. I'm Utkarsh coming from Singapore. I want to take you back not to 1974, though this is an incredible guitar. I should probably feature it more on this channel. I want to take you back to 1874. It's just convenient, 100 years back. Or 1890, let's just go with that, because that's when, say, Arthur Conan Doyle is writing Sherlock Holmes, one of my favorite pieces of literature, all the books and the little short stories. What's happening in 1890 or 1874? There are two things. There are two pieces of technology. There are two tools, much like this is a tool, that are a big part of what makes the human economy run, informs human culture. It is the fountain pen and it is the horse. The fountain pen is the means by which books are written. It's the means by which government is run. The horse is the means by which the entire world moves. You have horse carriages, right? It's transportation. You have those coaches, stage coaches that go across the United States. In 1890, can you imagine a world where these two centerpieces of the economy have no role to play? Can you imagine, if you're sitting in 1890, if you're Arthur Conan Doyle, can you imagine that there's a world where the horse has no real place in the economy? And that a fountain pen is just a relic, it's just a hobby item? Well, that is the world in which we live today, right? Things change, and things that are necessary tools often get made totally redundant by technology. Another good example that I always like is telephone operators, right? For me, I used to watch a lot of cartoons, so there was always like this, you have those old cartoons from Hanna-Barbera, you have people calling the telephone operator, asking them to get someone. In the 40s and 50s, when telephone operating was a thing, it was assumed that there was going to be a significant shortfall in the number of telephone operators. So they did that. There aren't enough women in America to operate all the telephones that we required once every house has a telephone. How did that pan out? You don't need a telephone operator anymore, right? What I'm trying to tell you is the world changes, right? We have certain things that we find very familiar, but we have to recognize that change happens. And when it comes to musical instruments, manual musical instruments, I'm calling them manual for a purpose, for a reason. They've had their place. There was a particular point in time when you could have mass music, say from the 1940s onwards, whether it's with radio or whether it's with the record industry. But you had to make the music manually. People had to sing, people had to play guitar, people had to play piano. It all had to be done manually, right? And in that era, of course, a lot happened. They created a counterculture of themselves. But now, with all the technology that we have, you can call it AI, you can call it automation, you can call it whatever you want. Manual musical instruments are almost going to be a thing of the past, because even for me right now, when I do music production, I, of course, play guitars manually. I sing manually, but everything else, keyboards, drums, I program it. Now, I need to have an understanding of how a drum works, how keyboard works. I need to have an understanding, but I'm not doing it manually anymore. And of course, I am a little bit of a relic myself. I've been playing guitar for 20 years, so I'm sure that there are solutions to even get a lot of guitar work done non-manually using AI or the latest tools. But I refuse to do it because I'm sentimental. I want to play guitar by myself. Right? But you have to recognize that people who grow up in an era where everything, like, there may be people today, my aunt who's a writer, she insists on writing everything freehand. Right? When I grew up, I mean, I write as well. I was happy to use a typewriter or rather a computer, Microsoft Word. But for her, the idea of writing her books through Microsoft Word makes her feel, all pukish. She's like, no, I will always write by freehand. And it's very interesting that if you look at children today, handwriting is disappearing. The skill of reading cursive writing is disappearing. And I was very interested by something that happened, a story that I heard on Sam Harris podcast, where he was mentioning that his daughter cannot read cursive writing. She can only read typed writing. I mean, I just didn't think it's possible. I'd assume that if you can read typed writing, you can read English, you can probably read normal handwriting, but apparently she can't. So that just shows you how the future generations will be, right? Things that we take for granted will be not taken for granted. Um, and it doesn't matter how critical a certain piece of technology is to the world that you know today. You today cannot imagine a music industry without instruments. It's unthinkable. But transitions happen. Now I'm going to reference another podcast, a point that I found very interesting. The Great Depression of 1929 onwards, rather the 1930s, is often attributed to the 1929 stock market crash. But of course, reality is a lot more complicated. Just a simple narrative, stock market crashed, everything went into depression. And one of the reasons why this thing happened is in the 1910s when World War I happened. What happened is that Europe had to redirect all of its all of its output towards the war effort, so they could not make enough food for themselves. So farmers in the United States suddenly had this huge demand to create food not only for the United States but also for Europe, right? And so the farming industry boomed like nobody's business in the 1910s in America because of the World War I in Europe. What happened in the 1920s? Two things happen. Europe starts recovering. So all that excess production that was captured in the economy, that was captured in the stock prices, that goes away because Europe starts recovering. So there's less demand for American farmers. Secondly, one big way that American farmers made money back then was the horse industry. Because beyond, they were a source for all the horses that we use for horse carriages, etc., for transportation. Farmers were the ones who were rearing them. So what happened is, in the 1920s, this is when Ford is taking off in a big way. The car industry is taking off in a big way. So all of a sudden, the demand for horses, the demand for the horse industry completely collapses. So you have a double whammy: less food, less production required on food, and the other source of income, the horse trade, also collapses. And that completely destroys a big chunk of America's farming economy that contributes to the Great Depression. What I tell you from the story is that horses were a critical part of the economy. Removing them from the economy created a Great Depression, part of the reasons why a Great Depression happened. Yet it happened. Guitars, musical instruments are small things. They influence culture, but even the largest guitar company is not the size of the business unit that I manage in a large company. That's how small the guitar industry is. So it doesn't really matter how critical, how sentimental you find guitars. They will go away if economics make it so. And so what is the future of this? What is my prediction? The future for instruments is going to be pretty much the future for fountain pens, for cursive writing, for horses. It's going to be a hobby, a fun hobby, a nice hobby, a hobby that will give a lot of reward and satisfaction to people who indulge in it. But it will ultimately be a hobby. It will not be consequential for business. It will not be consequential for culture. Maybe a little bit perhaps for culture. It will just be for your own satisfaction and the satisfaction of other people who enjoy the hobby together with you. People who are sitting together with you in the vintage Porsche club or something. I don't know. So there's no point being in denial. There's no point saying things are just going to crap. The world is always changing. It's just what it is. Change is inevitable. So accept it. Enjoy this hobby. Encourage other people to get into the hobby. It's a shame that only 1 in 10 people who try to get into this hobby get into the hobby. Encourage other people. Enjoy it. Just don't be sad that it is not going to be the center of the world the way rock music was from the 1960s to the 90s. That was a very particular moment in time. It was great. We enjoy reminiscing about it. The nostalgia industry based on that is incredible. But that's what it was. And now instruments like these will be hobby items. Nothing wrong with it. And just enjoy them. All right, folks, I hope this was interesting, and I'll see you next time.